This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, and faith-focused feature stories with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Exit strategy. Good afternoon. Welcome aboard. The Trump cabinet huddled today to try and hammer out a deal that would wind down the war with Iran. NBC's Richard Engel.
We've been in this situation for some time now, with peace talks that have been on and off and hopes rising and falling that this war will finally come to an end. But now we do seem to be entering into a crunch time. And this entire region is waiting to hear the outcome of President Trump's wider cabinet meeting today at the White House on Iran.
Rebecca Heinrichs with the Hudson Institute says the naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz has decimated Iran's economy. She thinks they desperately want to make a deal.
$500 million a day is what we are taking away from the coffers of the Iran regime because of this blockade. So I think that this is a sign that something is cracking inside the regime.
Iran is vowing retaliation for Monday's airstrikes in and around the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump flexing his political muscle again. His candidate cruised to victory last night in Texas in the most expensive Senate primary ever. Reporter Ryan Chandler.
This primary cost some $130 million. Most of that went towards supporting Senator John Cornyn, but Ken Paxton proved once again last night that the most valuable currency in Republican politics is the support of President Trump.
Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton scoring a more than 25-point win over incumbent Republican John Cornyn. Paxton telling supporters after the runoff results came in.
We just sent a Texas-sized message to Washington.
Yeah! Senator Cornyn, who's been a mainstay in Texas politics for 40 years, was gracious in defeat.
I've said throughout this race that I trust the voters of Texas, and they've made their decision, and I must respect it.
Cornyn becomes just the third incumbent senator the past 100 years to lose a primary election in Texas. Paxton moves on to face Democrat James Tallarico in November. We're learning more today about that deadly accident at a Washington state paper mill some 50 miles north of Portland. Last night, community members gathered to pay tribute to the victims.
Really a most tragic thing that's ever happened in Longview in my lifetime, and I've been here 71 years.
Early Tuesday, a chemical tank at the paper plant imploded. The scene so unstable that the search for victims had to be called off. NBC's Morgan Chesky.
The now destroyed tank at a paper plant holding nearly 1 million gallons of hazardous liquid before rupturing, leaving at least one person dead and several more critically injured.
This is the latest in a couple of toxic scares on the West Coast this week. Earlier, crews raced to contain another possible tank explosion in Orange County, California. NASA has plans for a permanent presence on the moon. The agency laying out an ambitious $20 billion plan to build a manned moon base. From there, NASA plans to launch astronauts further into space.
With Moonbase, Artemis astronauts will stay longer, explore farther, and conduct the kinds of science that advances exploration itself.
NASA's Deputy Associate Administrator, Dr. Lori Glaze, says the moon base will be built in 3 phases over 7 years. The Trump administration is taking on UCLA, accusing that school of deliberate indifference when it comes to the harassment of Jewish students. The suit says the school routinely ignored complaints about anti-Semitism.
The DOJ's Civil Rights Division alleges UCLA failed to prevent the anti-Semitic targeting of Jewish students on campus following the October 7, 2023 Hamas attacks in Israel. The lawsuit claims pro-Palestinian protesters were allowed to set up encampments and take control of the school's main quad for several days in 2024. The suit goes on to say Jewish and Israeli students were blocked from classrooms and other buildings, and some were beaten.
Tom Graham at Fox News. The Oklahoma City Thunder are a win away from returning to the NBA Finals. The defending champs topped the San Antonio Spurs in Game 5 of the Western Conference Finals last night. The winner will take on the New York Knicks for all the marbles starting next Wednesday. The Vegas Golden Knights are headed back to the Stanley Cup Finals. They completed the sweep Tuesday of the Colorado Avalanche. The Knights await the winner of the Canadiens Hurricanes hurricane series. Still to come on the Noon Report, a midweek edition. How to house the homeless, help for PA fruit farmers, and AI at school.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams. We're looking at a fairly pleasant, warm afternoon, but cooler air is on the way. We'll have forecast details coming up in 10 minutes.
All right. Thank you very much, Kevin Williams. Let's check the stories making news where you live, all across New York and Pennsylvania. We'll begin in Broome County, New York, where officials are working to get homeless people out of hotels and motels and into more stable housing arrangements.
That is our goal, to end the motel shelter system in Broome County and replace it with something far better.
County Executive Jason Garner.
Not just temporary rooms, not just emergency placements, but a real coordinated system focused on housing, stability, treatment, support, accountability, and long-term success.
Garner hosting a news conference yesterday to talk more about the plight of the homeless in the Binghamton area.
Hotels and motels were never designed to solve homelessness. And too often they leave people stuck in the same cycle they were already trying to escape.
The rate of family homelessness in New York State has skyrocketed the past few years. It's increased a whopping 141% since 2022. That's 4 times the national average. A violent assault last week at the Super 8 Motel in Bath, New York, has the mayor there calling for changes. Michael Sweet telling WENY the Steuben County Department of Social Services is housing dangerous people at that hotel, and it's made the community at large unsafe.
We're taking this serious. If the county chooses to do nothing, then we will absolutely declare it a safety threat to the community, and we will condemn the property.
Sweet is demanding all DSS placements to that Super 8 motel be stopped until a plan to safely house the transients is put in place. Steuben County Legislative Chair Kelly Fitzpatrick says she has no choice but to house those individuals in densely populated areas like Bath, Hornell, and Painted Post.
You have to be mindful where people are placed because there needs to be access to public transportation so that they can get to a store or mental health appointments, doctor's appointments. So we can't place someone in Jasper or Greenwood because there would be no way for them to get back to Bath.
Bath police have responded to no fewer than 159 disturbance calls at that Super 8 motel since January of last year. Pennsylvania fruit farmers are feeling the pinch from last month's freeze. The federal government's declared 17 counties in the Commonwealth disaster zones, and now farmers in those counties are eligible for assistance. More from Family Life's Sarah Harnish.
The declaration allows growers to apply for assistance to replant or rehabilitate damaged trees, bushes, or vines. It also opens up emergency loans to farmers that can be used to refinance certain debts and reorganize their operations. Growers have until January 26 to apply for the loans. Officials estimate the freeze could have ruined up to $200 million in crops. Sarah Harnish, Family Life News.
Hundreds of small business owners in New York are backing a 3-year moratorium on the construction of any data mining facilities. These massive structures are critical for AI advancement, but they require incredible amounts of water and energy to operate. The small business owners want the temporary ban included in the final budget, which is being hammered out right now in Albany. Lawmakers are scheduled to adjourn for summer next Thursday. Cheating in school has been a problem for generations, but thanks to AI, it's becoming a lot easier. At schools like Elmira College in New York's Southern Tier, professors are learning how to deal with artificial intelligence in the classroom.
The approach that I take to that, and that I think many of my colleagues take to that, is the same that they would have taken to any suspicion of plagiarism or academic dishonesty prior to the AI boom.
That's Elmira College English professor Matt Siebold.
When students realize they have used a technology in an excessive or dishonest way, they are grateful for the opportunity to prove that they can do it themselves or they can do it better.
Siebold tells 18 News he's not seeing much in the way of grade inflation, even with the advent of AI. A new report out of Pennsylvania shows helping small pharmacies stay afloat may not cost consumers that much at the prescription counter. More from Family Life's Brian Query.
The Pennsylvania Insurance Department says setting a minimum payment rate for pharmacies dispensing medications would raise prescription drug costs by less than 1%. The report found independent pharmacies could have received around $56 million more from pharmacy benefit managers between 2022 and 2024 with the change. Lawmakers passed reforms last year targeting some PBM practices, including steering patients toward affiliated pharmacies. State officials say hundreds of small pharmacies have closed across Pennsylvania in recent years, leaving some communities without nearby access to medications. Brian Query, Family Life News.
After reaching the semifinals in her past two major tournaments, tennis great and Western New York native Jessica Pegula lost her opening match at the French Open yesterday. Pegula was the number 5 seed and dropped her last two sets against an unseeded Australian after winning the first set 6-1. This was Pegula's earliest exit from the French Open since 2020 and just her second first-round upset at a Grand Slam tournament in the past 6 years. After 33 years in office, Pennsylvania's longest-serving state representative has lost re-election. Delaware County Democrat Greg Vitale was defeated in last week's primaries. Vitale was a champion for environmental causes in his 17 terms in the Pennsylvania state legislature.
Working on environmental policy in Harrisburg, it's difficult. It's like running into a brick wall of your head again and again. I mean, because the forces are just aligned against you. So it's really frustrating.
Vitale's last day at the office will be in November. He tells ABC 27 he intends to finish strong.
There's a saying in running, in a race, you run through the tape, complete my term without, people saying, oh, he just sort of gave up once he lost.
Lawmakers return to Harrisburg next week to continue work on the state budget. A selfless donation from one East Rochester, New York police employee to another has changed a family's life forever. After a long wait for a kidney transplant, Sergeant Noah Fast underwent his kidney transplant yesterday at Strong Memorial Hospital. The department's clerk, Tammy Elliott, is the one who donated her liver to save his life. They were, as they say in the medical profession, a perfect match. East Rochester Police Chief Michael Brandenburg.
Things like this certainly put it into perspective that we really do not just say that we're a family, we act it out.
Brandenburg says Sergeant Fast and Tammy Elliott have only worked together for a few years. He calls the donation a reminder of all the good there still is in the world. Most people wait 3 to 5 years for a kidney on the National Transplant Waiting List. The United States Air Force Thunderbirds will be performing this summer at the Frederick Douglass Greater Rochester International Airport. It's the first time in 3 years the world-famous Thunderbirds have visited there. The Thunderbirds will be performing August 8th and 9th. If you've never seen them, definitely worth checking out. Sports news, the Phillies hold off San Diego 4-3 on the road. Bryce Harper, JT Realmuto, and Trey Turner all went deep. Philly hopes to complete the 3-game sweep today. The New York Yankees throttled Kansas City yesterday, 15-1 your final. The Bronx Bombers have won 3 straight. The Mets lost to Cincy 7-2 at Citi Field. They've dropped 5 in a row. And the Pirates pound the Cubs 12-1. What's going on with the Cubbies? Chicago has now lost 10 straight games. Still to come on the Noon Report for Wednesday, Trump cabinet meeting, runoff results from Texas, and a Christian response to Gay Pride Month.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stone Street. Ryan Bomberger is an amazing speaker with an amazing story, and it's the subject of a new book and a new documentary. To tell us more about it, here's Ryan Bomberger.
"You should have been aborted," the Harvard student yelled in my face. He added some profane epithets, daring me to respond. It wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. I've been told this so many times throughout my life, I've lost count. It's why my newly released autobiographical book and documentary are entitled Should Have Been Aborted. You can visit shouldhavebeenaborted.com to learn more. I am the 1% used 100% of the time to justify abortion, Even though my birth mom was a victim of the horrific violence of rape, I'm forever grateful she didn't make me a victim of the horrific violence of abortion. That student's cold and callous remarks were out of desperation. The pro-abortion side was unprepared and unhinged. Interestingly, I had convinced myself that I was unworthy of speaking at an Ivy League school prior to the event. I thought students would challenge me with questions complete with citations. There were no citations, just incessant interruptions. The professor who was slated to informally debate me had an arrogance about her as well that was deeply troubling. Despite agreeing to the debate, she literally knew nothing about the premise of it, abortion's devastating impact in the Black community. Harvard's hostility to the truth is a common one I experience not only in secular university events, but in Christian colleges as well. Too many Christian students have been propagandized into embracing a social gospel instead of the gospel. Too many Bible-evading churches do the same. We have a crisis, not of white fragility, but of worldview fragility. We live in a culture that pretends, since Roe, an injustice that has caused the deaths of over 65 million lives created in God's image is merely a political issue that we can biblically have different opinions on. No, we can't. The fact that I'm alive isn't something political. It's something spiritual, supernatural, and deeply moral. Because of a courageous birth mom, I'm still here. Because of two incredible parents who adopted and loved me despite how I came to be, I'm living out my purpose. Because of an amazing wife who adores me, and vice versa, we are raising 4 children, both biological and adopted, to love Jesus and those he created. Because of God, I'm able to tell my story of how he enabled triumph to rise from tragedy. I've been smeared by mainstream media, denounced by the ACLU, attacked by Antifa, feared by Planned Parenthood, and even sued by the NAACP for my factivism. After 2 years in federal court, by the way, free speech won and the NAACP lost. I must be doing something right. That confused Harvard Students Challenge wasn't one that would break me. Abortion didn't take my life. Severe depression in my 30s didn't take my life. Bilateral blood clots in my lungs in my 40s didn't take my life. And my recent battle with cancer didn't take my life. I've battled worse and lesser things. God has been my rock and my salvation, my refuge. I will not be shaken. Why? Because I know I was meant to be.
That was Ryan Bomberger. To learn more about his new book and how to see the documentary Should Have Been Aborted, go to shouldhavebeenaborted.com. That's shouldhavebeenaborted.com. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.
Thank you, John. Let's head outside. It's weather where you live with meteorologist Kevin Williams.
Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast for this afternoon. A fair amount of sunshine in western New York, partial sunshine elsewhere. Clouds will be a little more stubborn in parts of central and eastern Pennsylvania, and an isolated thundershower in Pennsylvania south of I-80 cannot be ruled out. Temperatures mainly mid-70s to mid-80s. We drop to the low 50s tonight, patchy clouds. A cooler day tomorrow with sun and clouds, high temps 60s and low 70s. On Friday, some sunshine and clouds will gather with high temperatures in the upper 60s and 70s.
All right, thank you, Kevin. This is the Noon Report on Family Life. I'm your host, Bob Price, and here's what's going on Wednesday, May 27th. More talks, but not much in the way of progress when it comes to winding down the war in Iran. The president and his cabinet are huddled today to discuss an exit strategy. ABC's Ian Pannell.
We're seeing a slowdown of traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. You've got the U.S. naval blockade there. You've also got the Iranians enforcing their own blockade. Both sides are kind of poised for a resumption in hostilities, even though they're talking about the possibility of a ceasefire. And the reality is that at the moment, there's no tangible progress towards either.
U.S. national security expert Andrew Harding.
Any type of deal is going to come down to if Iran is willing to give up the enriched uranium that poses the greatest threat to American national security. It's very difficult to trust this regime, and they have a horrible track record with following through.
Iran's vowing to retaliate for Monday's U.S. air airstrikes in and around the Strait of Hormuz. A longtime lawmaker was knocked out last night in Texas by a Trump-backed challenger in the runoff election for U.S. Senate.
Last night's results proved once again that this is Donald Trump's party right now. His candidates went 4-0 in contested runoffs last night.
NBC's Garrett Hake says in that Texas runoff election, State Attorney General Ken Paxton soundly defeated GOP incumbent John Cornyn. Kevin Corke with Fox News says the president's win streak in this year's primaries has been nothing short of impressive.
If you want to win and you're Republican, you want the president's endorsement. Look at this governor, House, Senate. The president is still undefeated.
Paxton moves on to face Democrat James Tallarico in November. A massive chemical tank containing 1 million gallons of a corrosive liquid imploded yesterday and collapsed at a paper mill in the state of Washington, 50 miles north of Portland. Fire Rescue Chief Scott Goldstein.
The tank remains unstable, creating a dangerous situation for our personnel.
More from ABC's Melissa O'Don.
The facility, which employs about 1,000 people, makes a variety of paper goods. Officials say the 900,000-gallon tank contains white liquor, a mixture of chemicals that can burn the skin or burn the lungs if inhaled.
At least one person was killed, 9 others are missing. Nearly a dozen were taken to the hospital with chemical burns. NASA's taking its first step toward building a permanent manned base on the moon. The space agency updating its ambitious plan at a news conference yesterday. Reporter Ira Spitzer was there.
NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman laid out a $20 billion blueprint with private industry playing a central role for a permanent American foothold on the lunar surface, including robotic landers, drones, and terrain vehicles to ultimately pave the way for humans.
The moon base will be built in 3 phases over the next 7 years. Vice President J.D. Vance says the White House has recovered $160 billion by rooting out fraud in small business loans, COVID relief, student aid, and other government handouts. His anti-fraud task force has been making the rounds across America looking for fraud, waste, and abuse. Vance says this should not be a political issue.
Everybody should care about rooting out fraud. Everybody should care about saving the American taxpayers' money. And importantly, everybody should care about actually protecting the programs that only work if the money funding those programs isn't being stolen by fraudsters.
The VP hosted a White House roundtable yesterday with Republican attorneys general from 14 states. 24 Democratic AGs declined to attend. Former Attorney General Pam Bondi has been diagnosed with thyroid cancer. Axios reporting the 60-year-old was diagnosed shortly after leaving the Justice Department. The report says Bondi is in recovery mode. She's also been appointed by the president to an advisory panel focused on AI policy. The American Cancer Society out today with new guidelines to screen for colorectal cancer.
The new guidelines reaffirm that average risk adults should screen for colon cancer starting at age 45. The American Cancer Society is issuing new guidelines for blood-based screening in a doctor's office and for those at-home screening kits. With early detection, 5-year survival rates for colorectal cancer top 90%, making screening even more important. Colorectal cancer is now the top cancer killer of adults under the age of 50. I'm Rory O'Neill.
Talk about nerves of steel. Robert Kennedy Jr. caught on tape this week grabbing a couple of snakes at the Florida home of Dr. Mehmet Oz. Here's reporter Michael Kastner.
A viral video on Tuesday showed the Health and Human Services Secretary cornering 2 snakes on the patio of a Florida beachfront home owned by Dr. Oz and picking them up with his bare hands while his wife, actress Cheryl Hines, tells him to let them go.
Are they biting?
Yeah.
Honey, let it go.
In the caption for the video, Kennedy said the snakes were non-venomous black racers, which are common in Florida. It's not clear what happened to the snakes. Earlier this month, Kennedy posted a photo of himself grabbing a bird, which he said he rescued at Washington Dulles Airport. I'm Michael Kastner.
Construction started on a temporary arena for an upcoming UFC event at the White House. The UFC Freedom 250 Arena towers over the south lawn of the president's residence. It can hold up to 5,000 spectators. That mixed martial arts event will happen Tuesday, June 14th, which also happens to be both Flag Day and President Trump's 80th birthday. It's also my birthday, oddly enough. You're listening to the Noon Report, a midweek edition on Family Life.
A Christian response to so-called Pride Month. Welcome back to another edition of Real Answers, a regular Wednesday feature during the Family Life Noon Report, where we discuss the issues that matter to families with licensed mental health counselor Christopher Anderson. Welcome back, Chris.
Thanks, Mark. Good to be here.
Good to have you. You don't have to search Scripture really hard to find warnings against pride in general. James comes to mind. God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. And here in June, coming up, we'll once again be inundated with rainbow flags, a gay pride symbol that is anathema to Christians who attach such different meaning to the rainbow symbol. It's never felt an accident to me that it was chosen as a symbol for a way of life that's in direct opposition to what Scripture teaches.
Well, I think the enemy knew what he was doing and prompting this type of a symbol. Christians do take the rainbow to mean a solemn promise from God that he would not flood the earth again. I don't think there was any accident in the choosing of that flag, that's for sure.
Yeah, and he chose to flood the earth back then because of people living like that, among other things. It's just rife with painful irony. So here we are facing this again as Christians. What do you do? And some churches have blurred the lines between loving others and supporting sinful lifestyles, and others just sidestep grace and just pound the truth. Where do you find the right formula for dealing with it?
Well, I think making sure that you're aware as a believer what the Bible does say about sexuality. And if you're not sure on that, please take the time to prayerfully study Romans chapter 1, take a look at what Jude says, 2 Peter, among other places in the Bible, to see that this issue is not ambiguous. You can disagree with what is said in the Bible, but you cannot deny what it says.
As rainbow flags start to fly, how do you act out that distinction between being a loving Christian and not affirming what we know to be sin?
Part of it is to understand what this really means to be a loving Christian. What does speaking the truth in love mean? More than likely, this is going to happen when you have the opportunity to have a conversation one-on-one with somebody from the community and just simply talk to them as people. Make sure that you understand, too, that God's definition of love is ultimately what we all need, including the LGBT community. They really need God's love, and the enemy has twisted and contorted love and brought in an unhealthy and an unbiblical or an ungodly element of physical attraction to masquerade as love.
You're listening to Real Answers. I'm Mark Webster, along with licensed mental health counselor Christopher Anderson, talking about the Christian response to so-called Pride Month. I saw one source that said, in short, the best Christian response to Pride Month is polite non-participation. Agree, disagree?
I would agree, because if you think about it, going to events where the event is celebrated, your presence there implicitly implies support of and participation in the celebration. Certain elements of this community will try to say, well, because you didn't do that, you hate us. We have got to be willing to say that just because I don't agree and I see this issue differently than you do does not mean I wish you ill. The exact opposite is actually true. We want these folks to understand the saving grace of what Christ did on the cross for us, and that he can restore, and that he wants us to be restored in living a life of freedom apart from the lies of the enemy. Remember, your job isn't to draw their hearts to God. That is God's job. Your job is simply to be sensitive to God's leading, prayerfully asking for wisdom as to when to engage in conversation and when not to.
Someone once said timing's everything. There's certainly some truth to that.
Yeah.
You touched on this as we wrap up, just knowing what it says in Romans and Hebrews. Paul was great at realizing that, he might not go and change a society in a fell swoop, but you reach individual people and then you let the Holy Spirit do its work from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're not necessarily called to go out and hold rallies to try to convince large groups of people, especially in June. But, again, it's that one-on-one. God is very relational, and a lot of times it's one-on-one with folks. Sadly, our higher education systems are being used also against the people in this community, because if you were to propose a research project to really get into more of the why does this happen? Why do people have these attractions and this and that? I don't really think any secular universities, institutional research boards would approve such a study because of how politicized this has become. And that sadly puts everybody at a disadvantage for really understanding why this is happening. So really they're leaving people that are in this community with the only choice of you either accept it and celebrate it, or you're not going to be accepted anywhere. And that's very, very sad and very unfortunate unfortunate and tragic consequence of the way society has dealt with this issue.
Yeah, it certainly is greatly enmeshed, not only within the education circles, but even in government. It's an uphill battle for sure, but again, as we said, it really comes down to loving somebody individually, not acceding to their beliefs, but firm compassion.
We just got to remember too, Mark, that it can be difficult because it can be kind of intimidating to approach somebody in a conversation like this, but pray for wisdom, pray for strength, pray for compassion in your own heart, that you can see this person as somebody who needs Christ just as much as everybody else does. Don't let yourself be intimidated by anybody that either is in this community themselves or by anybody else that supports this community through celebration, because ultimately that's not right either. And we are not called to be abused by this as well.
Good point. I guess it always comes back down to knowing your Bible and coming down to prayer.
And having a good, solid support system. Absolutely.
Absolutely. You've been listening to Real Answers, a Wednesday feature of the Family Life Noon Report, where we discuss the issues important to families with licensed mental health counselor Christopher Anderson. Thanks as always, Chris.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you.
Great discussion today, guys. You can hear Mark's entire conversation with Chris on a Christian response to Gay Pride Month. It's our latest Real Answers podcast, available at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or FamilyLife.org. And finally, at noon for a Wednesday, it's going to be a longer summer this year, and you can thank a calendar quirk for that. Correspondent Bree Tennis.
This summer will be 7 days longer than last. That's because Memorial Day, always the final Monday of May, came earlier than usual, and Labor Day, always the first Monday of September, will be on the 7th, the latest possible day for that holiday. All that calendar math means we'll have 106 days of summer this year. This fluke has happened before, and it will happen again, but you have to wait until 2037 for that. I'm Bree Tennis.
All right, thank you, Bree, and enjoy the longer summer, folks. That's our world, the world we live in. Wednesday, May 27th. I'm Bob Price, Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.